I said that I would share how I went from being a mass communications graduate to a licensed therapist studying to be a doctor of clinical behavioral health. It's a long process, but stick with me. So let's backtrack a little bit. I started my college career as a double major in business, and I think it was like international policy or something like that. In the mind of 18-year-old me, I wanted to go be a lawyer. Thank God I didn't choose that because that's just not my ministry. So once I transferred, backtrack again, I was playing football my freshman year at a very small school, and I figured out that football was over for me and I wanted to transfer back home, which is where I made probably one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life, was to transfer to Norfolk State, where I then became a mass communications major. So while in my freshman year, I picked up a camera and I was like, oh, this is very familiar to me, especially that summer leaving my first school and going to Norfolk State. I started to spend a lot of time with my uncle, who is also a photographer and videographer. And my grandfather was also a photographer. So it kind of runs in the family. So that summer, I spent a lot of time with another media company, just getting to know cameras, getting to know the game. And I went to Norfolk State and was like, I could see this as a career for me. So I changed my major to mass communications. And while I was on campus, I actually was on track to be a mass communications professional. I had work study through the library where I was doing media for them. I did a lot of freelancing while I was on campus, photography, videography. Also worked with the yearbook staff, the Student Government Association, also worked with the athletics department. So it was a lot that I was doing that was, guiding me towards being a media professional. Here comes the pivot, I guess. When I was a junior, I started to volunteer even more at an elementary school with the school social worker. And our relationship kind of, helped me explore the behavior of kids, home environments, their mental health. And then I landed a math remediation specialist job there because I was at the school so much. I'm naturally really good at math. They wanted me to be around the kids because I had good rapport with the kids, but also I could help the kids who were failing math pass their standardized tests. And when I was a remediation specialist, I started to see that a lot of my kids who were in my class also had special relationships with the principal and the administration. I'm like, why are y'all getting in so much trouble, but also in my class? So started to make a correlation, started to see some things that were going on at home, some behaviors, and then it made me want to explore why these things happen. I knew that I couldn't really teach them as much as I wanted to if things at home were not going well. So I pivoted and talked to a lot of people, started to do some research, and my initial plan was to become a school counselor. And once I started, I interviewed for the master's program, got in, and as I started to explore, I was like, you know what, I think mental health counseling is more my route and less of school counseling. So I switched from school counseling to mental health counseling before the program started. And the rest is history. The rest is actually right now. So I have been, like I said, a therapist since 2019. That's when I graduated with my master's. And it's been a fun ride ever since. And while I was in graduate school, of course, I had the math remediation specialist job. That ended up going to me being a special education teacher assistant at an alternative school, which because of teacher, turnover and things, I actually ended up getting my own class while I was in the alternative school. I know it's a lot of moving pieces. But from there, I started to see a lot of behaviors and things, of course, because I was in the alternative school. That then led me to my first job in the actual mental health field. I went to go be a residential counselor at a residential treatment facility in Virginia Beach. And this is where I really got my crash course of mental health and everything that's involved with diagnosis and behaviors and symptoms and all those things. I kind of got everything thrown at me as my first job. And I would say it was probably the best experience I could have had because I learned on the go, trial by fire. And I think it's made me a really, 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 really good therapists, much improved therapists. I always say you should work in certain areas if you really want to develop yourself as a mental professional and learn a little bit about behaviors in different avenues and different situations and environments. In that environment, I was with the kids every day, 8, sometimes 16-hour days with the kids, seeing their behaviors in school, in their living domains, socially with the other kids, and just seeing those things and being able to help them with the situations they were going through in real time. So that kind of gave me the crash course. And then my career has gone so many different places since then. I left there and did therapeutic day treatment inside the school system. I worked at a group home as my master's internship, residential boys group home, and worked in outpatient. I've worked in substance abuse. I worked at a jail farm, which is a different story in itself. Worked in geriatrics, worked with adults, worked in my own practice, ran my own practice for about 2 years. And now I work in the local children's hospital in the treatment facility where I do outpatient therapy. So it's been a lot of places that I've gone with this career. And I wanted to do that, intentionally because I wanted to see what areas I like, what areas I didn't like, so that I can kind of cross things off and get back to where I wanted to be. And I always knew I would get back to working with kids, and I think that's where I'm actually supposed to be. I always encourage new therapists and seasoned therapists, if you really want to know about the field of mental health, please try to find some part-time or full-time work in different areas of the field. I now know I don't want to work in a jail because I worked there before. I knew residential just wasn't for me because I've been there. There aren't many areas that I haven't been in that the field of mental health really offers. The only place I haven't been that I've considered working in before I interviewed for a place a couple of times is an inpatient facility. I would love to go to an inpatient facility eventually in my career as a therapist, but I just haven't been there yet. That's one of the few areas where I'm like, you know what, maybe I'll allow myself to get that type of experience later on down the line if it presents itself. But yeah, so that's my journey from being actually a business and policy major to now being someone who is a licensed therapist studying clinical behavioral health for their doctorate. I know sometimes the path isn't linear, and I'm living proof of that. And I think I've made the best decisions with all the information that I've had. And sometimes I didn't have information. I was just going on the fly, hoping that it will work. So I'm very thankful for where I am now. And, I'm always open to giving suggestions and helping the younger generation come up. A lot of people who are in graduate school or getting their bachelor's ask me questions about, becoming a therapist, the route I took, different avenues in which they could take. So I'm always open to sharing my experiences and sharing my education on things. So if you have any questions, please.